Good afternoon. I'm Andy Talkov, Senior Director for Curatorial Affairs at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, and welcome to Curators at Work, a regular series where our curatorial team shares our own stories about working with the museum's collection and offers some behind-the-scenes perspectives about what we do. Curators at Work is part of a vast library of online programs offered as part of our Virginia History at Home initiative. So if you haven't already seen what we have to offer, you can go to virginiahistory.org/at-home to enjoy a curated selection of free digital resources, including podcasts, webinars, virtual tours, and hours of recorded lectures. So before we get started, I'd like to thank our members. None of the work we do would be possible without their support. The VMHC doesn't receive state operating support, and it's through private donations that we're able to preserve and share Virginia's story and offer programs like this. So as curators, one of the primary ways that we share Virginia's rich and diverse history is through our displays and exhibitions. And as part of those projects, and in an effort to better represent all Virginians, our curators often work with very interesting community partners to develop our museum displays. And today, I'm really excited to introduce you to one of our wonderful and longtime partners. So for 3 years now, we've worked with the Richmond-based Next Move project to spotlight a community that's frequently absent from museum displays and other public spaces, the nearly 900,000 Virginians with disabilities. So beginning on October 17th, we'll feature portraits of 16 remarkable Virginians in a display organized with Next Move called capABLE. So to talk about this project and the representation of the disability community, I want to introduce you to 2 incredible history makers. But before I do that, I want to mention that we are very interested in your comments and questions. So if you have any comments and questions, please use the comment bar in the platform that you're using, and we'll try to incorporate those into our discussion or talk about them at the end. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Elizabeth Redford. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Andy. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us today. Elizabeth is the co-founder and executive director of Next Move. And later on in the discussion, we'll actually meet one of the participants in this year's capABLE project. But I did want to talk with you a little bit about what Next Move is all about and the work that you're doing, and a little bit about the history of the disability rights movement.
Sure. Yes, of course. Thanks for having us. Next Move Program, we are a nonprofit here in Central Virginia. And what we do is we partner with school systems as well as the business community to create guided internship experiences for young adults with diverse abilities. So we are taking them into businesses, and our team of special educators are providing on-the-job training so that they're learning how to do different jobs and also learning about the soft skills connected to those roles. And then they also participate in on-site education, and our curriculum has been endorsed by the Virginia Department of Education.
Well, you're doing really remarkable work, and I understand that today I have to give a call out. So you're working from a bakery today, right? Which is one of the initiatives of the Next Move project. Tell us about that.
I am. So our nonprofit, we first started out by just offering what we call our community internship experiences. So we go into businesses like Wells Fargo, Cork Hotel, Ledbury, Altria, and we set up these internships. And along the way, our nonprofit's been around since 2015. Along the way, we started adding more and more to our life skills curriculum. And through that, developed a partnership with a local baker named Britt Falabella. And then we expanded an entire baking program, and it's called Tablespoons Baking. And we're actually opening a bakery later this year in the Westover Hills community, and it will be an internship site as well as an employment site.
Well, that's incredible. I know you've been waiting a long time. I know that, the recent pandemic has maybe slowed down some of your plans to move. When we were talking earlier, we talked a little bit about how the recent pandemic, which is certainly a significant historical event and is having a daily impact on the people watching this program and on people who will watch this program. Tell us a little bit about how COVID has affected the disability community and the people that you're working with.
Sure, that's a great question. It has significantly impacted our specific community, and disproportionately so. There's already a staggering unemployment rate for young adults with diverse abilities here in the Commonwealth. And our particular population, we work with individuals with autism and individuals with intellectual differences. And for that specific population of young adults, there was a 70% unemployment rate here in the state of Virginia and an 80% unemployment rate for that same group nationally. And that was pre-pandemic. And so the little data that has come out about how employment has been directly impacted by COVID for our specific group of individuals, there's not a lot out there, but the little data that has been collected has been very, very sad and troubling for most individuals, and especially for the families that we serve. As many as 1 million jobs were lost just in the month of March alone. Sort of that first month that kicked off the pandemic here in the US, 1 million jobs were lost just to this specific community across the US. And those were really hard fought for roles in often cases. So to see that so many more folks now have been either laid off or furloughed, it's really challenging. And we know that often the young adults we specifically work with, because they're younger, they're just out of high school, they tend to be more in entry-level roles as they're beginning their careers. So unfortunately, they're probably not going to be the first hired back as businesses resume in-person operations. It's going to be a while before we can start to really make a crack again at that unemployment rate. Yeah.
Well, I know it'll be slow coming back for everybody, but that's remarkable how hardly hit that community is. And I know that when we start to talk to Ryann about people in the workplace, there are other challenges too. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the history of disability rights and sort of where we've come from, and how far we've come in the last 60 or so years, and then how much work we have to do to get to where we'd like to be.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics, so I'm so glad to dive into this.
All right, you roll with it.
So we often, as we are developing partnerships out in the community with businesses, are just finding in general, so many organizations have limited knowledge about disability rights, and the historical movement that so many amazing advocates and self-advocates really laid the groundwork for, especially starting back in the 1970s. And when I put it in the context of the young adults that we work with, it still makes me emotional to think that prior to the 1970s, every single person that we employ with a diverse ability or that we serve through our programming would have been in institutions. And these individuals would not have been connected to their families. They would not have been able to find employment in the community or be part of the larger community. They would not have probably significant others or friendships, hobbies, interests. They would literally have been shut away in these institutions. And we also know that the way that these individuals were often treated in these facilities was horrific. Everything from forced sterilization to not having enough access to food or to additional medical requirements that they may need. So it's a pretty dark period within our country's history, and especially here in the state of Virginia, we had several institutions that would have served the students that I work with today. But we noticed that in the 70s, there was a big push to deinstitutionalize. And so these individuals were brought into their home communities because of a number of different reasons. Everything from the Medicaid system changing to having better access to medication from local pharmacies, to funding cuts and budget cuts, and just also just general awareness hitting most citizens in our state and throughout our country because of several campaigns that were done by photojournalists. There was an amazing expose that was done about Willowbrook that aired nationally that helped to really expose some of the horrific living conditions in which these individuals lived under. And then we also saw individuals like Ed Roberts and Judy Heumann, and she was the main focus of Crimp Camp, if you've seen that on Netflix, and their efforts. So those individuals really kicked off this movement. And then throughout the 70s to 90s, we saw a lot of legislative changes leading up to the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is probably the piece of legislation that affects our specific population the most because it has to do with equal access in the workplace and to workplace accommodations. And the young woman here on the slide, Jennifer Kellen, there's an amazing clip of her army crawling up the steps of the US Capitol at age 8 and screaming, "I can do it, I can do it. You will not get us down, you will not keep us down." And when President Bush at the time spoke about why he agreed to support that bill after it had been rejected many times by other administrations, he specifically mentioned Jennifer and some of the other self-advocates that he met with. So when we think about how we get to this point where we are now, where we're talking about the need for inclusion in the workplace and in the community and representation, that's a pretty recent conversation when not that long ago, these individuals would have been, again, shut away in an institution entirely, and they wouldn't have been a part of communities or part of the workplace. So we've come quite a ways, but there still is a lot more work that needs to be done.
Yeah. So, well, I think that the capABLE project, dovetails really nicely with this new effort to have better representation, and it's such an incredible project because it shows young people who are in the environment that they love, doing work that they love, and they're really remarkable. Regardless of whether they have a disability or not. And I think that that's really one of the strong messages that comes out when we learn the stories of the people involved in that program. You did a great video in 2018, which was the first year of capABLE. We're going to show that. It's about a minute long. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the program as it's developed and where we are today.
The capABLE project was really inspired based upon what we see every day through the Next Move program. And that is that almost 22,000 high school students with disabilities graduate every single year in our state. And unfortunately, there's almost a 70% unemployment rate for this population in the Commonwealth. And so capABLE is really inspired based off wanting to have a larger conversation in our community and make people aware of these statistics, but also show the benefit of what happens when these individuals do have access to the necessary supports and inclusive programming. Not only do they go on and live happy and fulfilled lives, but as a community, we all benefit. Our community is more diverse, it's more inclusive, it's more vibrant. We all benefit when these individuals are involved and they're thriving.
I have to say that the message about inclusion, of these members of our community makes our community stronger. It just reminds me that, that inclusion of all kinds of groups and all kinds of communities in the stories that we tell at the museum, and in history in general, like makes our understanding of the past and the present, much more stronger as well. So where did this idea come from to do a photo project that focused on some of the people that you work with?
So really was inspired by the young adults that we serve every day, and hearing from them and hearing from their families about just the lack of representation. Everything from movies to books to pop culture, even advertisements. It's very rare that you see the individuals that we serve that are prominently displayed in a really empowering way. Not as individuals that need our help or need our support, but individuals who are doing great things in the community. And what was really special about this particular project is it was a way for us as a nonprofit to collaborate with other nonprofits in the area. Many of these individuals were actually referred to us by different nonprofits in the area. And as you mentioned earlier, we were able to do their photo shoots at different locations connected to their stories. So it was a way to also bring in the larger Central Virginia region and showcase some of the really great organizations and public places like parks that we get to enjoy here as Virginians. And then, of course, collaborating with our amazing photographers. All of them donate their time to this project each year. And traditionally, we have 5 that work with us each year, and we do different photo shoots around the area. But they are fantastic, and really, it's just an incredible partnership with you all, with these different photographers, and then, of course, with our models. So all of the collaboration really pulls it together.
So you said that some of the people who participate in the program are recommended to you through organizations that they're working with. Is it a competitive process to be included? So I know that you sort of limit the number of people that are involved to somewhere between like 15 and 20 people each year. But are there more people who want to participate in this than you can accommodate?
There are. So obviously, we're pretty busy during the day with our internship programming and the baking program. If we could, we certainly would love to accommodate more individuals and have it be an even larger campaign, but it becomes a matter of logistics often. But yes, typically we do have a lot of interest from models, and really what we're looking for when we think about who's going to be a great model is just a variety of different kinds of disabilities being represented, and not just necessarily our specific community that we directly serve in terms of ID and autism. But we're also specifically looking for people that, again, are thriving. They are maybe employed, they're great athletes, artists, scholars, business owners. They have really rich and diverse relationships in the community. Maybe they're great volunteers, or they're really involved with the faith community. But we want to show great variety of representation in terms of what their interests are, because we feel like collectively it's a much richer overall story. We can share all these different perspectives and experiences.
Yeah, and so there have been the people that you've worked with are really, truly remarkable, and tell such interesting stories about themselves. Like, I think that one of the great things about the way that the images are interpreted is that they're interpreted by the individual. And so everyone who's watching can go to your website and not only see the stories of this year's, I think there are 16 individuals that you featured, but from past years too. So tell us a little bit about one of the more memorable experiences that you've had working on this project.
Oh, that's a great question. So the very first year that we did capABLE, we had a woman who was a model who was a beloved receptionist at SOAR 365, which is a fairly large state level nonprofit here in Virginia that serves individuals with intellectual differences. and they do day support camps, you name it. They've got a large office, headquarters, and day support program here in Richmond specifically. And she knows every single person that comes in and out of that building all day long by voice. She's blind, and she was born blind. And the coolest thing I think about working on her specific portrait was we felt like it wouldn't be appropriate to just do a standard portrait. We wanted her to be able to interact with it and to feel included in what this was about, because it's all about inclusion and meeting people where they are. So we were able to collaborate with VCU, with their curation team, and have them use a 3D printer to take her image, her portrait, and turn it into 3D print. And so we had a standard portrait that individuals could come and view, but we also had one specifically for folks that were blind or visually impaired, so that they could experience her portrait. And I remember her crying actually at the reception, saying it's the first time she's ever been able to experience her likeness other than feeling her own face, because she's never had an opportunity like that before. So I think that's probably my most memorable, but there have been so many. And certainly each year when we select a keynote speaker, we try to find an individual like Ryann, who you all will hear from in a minute, who has a really strong story that we know can connect with our audience and connect with the other models. So also working with the keynote speakers has been another special highlight too.
Yeah. All right, well, so I know Ryann has been patiently waiting for us to introduce her to the conversation. So let's get Ryann here. Hey, Ryann.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So Ryann, I have to say that I'm not even sure how to introduce you in some ways, because you really beat me to the punch in the piece that you wrote for the capABLE project. You described yourself as more than a beauty queen in a wheelchair, which we'll get to, but you are a registered nurse, flower child, disability advocate, sour candy addict, karaoke queen, sassy Southern belle, right? And then you say that there's so much more than meets the eye, which I think is certainly true. So how did you get involved in the Next Move project and the capABLE project, this year?
Absolutely. So I actually found out about the capABLE project through my friend Luke Witt, who works with them. And I was already doing some disability advocacy as Miss Wheelchair Virginia for 2020 and 21. And so when capABLE came around, my friend Luke said, take a shot. Why don't you apply and just see what happens? And that's kind of been my theme of this year is, you know what, I'm going to put myself out there and we'll see what happens. And here we are.
All right. Well, so without any further ado, I think we should probably show folks the image that Luke took of you.
Yes.
So when I know that you've been photographed many times, so tell me what you find special or what your feelings are about this particular image.
So I have only been in a wheelchair for 2 years, so I don't have a ton of pictures that I see of myself in my wheelchair. So seeing this image of not only me in my ridiculously decked out rainbow colored chair, but I'm wearing my scrubs, I have my trusty stethoscope with me, as well as my beauty queen attire. And that whole day, I just felt so confident and felt like this is me. This is all of the ridiculous puzzle pieces that make up Ryann. And I absolutely adore how the photo came out.
Yeah. Well, so the photo, I guess, for those, Richmonders or people who have visited Richmond, you went out to Browns Island to take the photograph, right, on the James River?
Mm-hmm. We did.
And you said earlier that you wanted the city behind you because you live in Roanoke.
Yeah.
And you grew up in Bedford.
Yes.
So you're from the western part of the state, but that you have a particular sort of love of the whole city of Richmond.
I do. I have spent a lot of time there over the years, whether it be coming up as a kid for dance competitions to watch the Richmond Ballet, whether it be coming up for other photo shoots or just to visit friends. But we just thought it was so appropriate, being the capital, as I am Miss Wheelchair Virginia, to kind of encompass the entire city, since my reign is over the entire state.
That's
So we
right.
love that kind of picture.
So I think you're probably going to have to explain to people what Miss Wheelchair Virginia is, and how you've been. I really thought it was interesting in talking to you earlier about sort of how you've decided to use that platform.
Sure. So the Miss Wheelchair Virginia program and the Miss Wheelchair program as a whole, it's a national program, that it's not a beauty pageant. I was very afraid when I was first asked about it. I said, if y'all put me in an evening gown and a bikini and make me tap dance on stage, we're going to have another thing coming. So it is an advocacy-based pageant, based on 2 interview sessions, a project kind of to depict yourself and some education materials, but as well as developing a platform very similar to the Miss America pageants, and based on our public speaking abilities. So through winning the title of Miss Wheelchair Virginia, I have been given this incredible opportunity to travel all over my home state, speaking about disability advocacy, about working in healthcare as a disabled woman. And my particular focus has been on getting or showing that disabled individuals are capable of so much more than we are just cited as, oh, you're in a wheelchair, you obviously cannot be a nurse. Oh, you're in a wheelchair, you cannot hold down a full-time job. And so I am working tirelessly to show that it is possible, and that there's so much that people don't know about the disabled community and what we're capable of, and what we may even be more suited for than an able-bodied individual as far as the workforce. And so that's why Next Move means so much to me.
Yeah, it completely dovetails with the whole purpose of the capABLE project. You said earlier that you have only been in a wheelchair for a couple of years now, and I think that in some ways gives you a different perspective of what that experience is like. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of how you came to need a wheelchair, and maybe a little bit about, I know you've talked to a lot of people about being in a wheelchair, and I for those of our audience that don't know, you're very open about this, and have a very popular Instagram account, which I would say is shockingly, in a good way, honest about the experience that you've had, and what you're doing in your life. And so tell us a little bit about how you came to be in a wheelchair.
Absolutely. So I was born with a fairly rare genetic collagen disorder called Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, or EDS. I was born this way, but it is progressive and degenerative. What it does is all of the collagen in my body. And when I think of collagen, we kind of think of the glue that holds everything together. So all of your connective tissues, your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, your skin, everything is very stretchy and very loose. Everything from my joints dislocate way too easily. I have frequent dislocations with that. As well as my organs are affected, because your organs are also made up of collagen. So I had my gallbladder removed because it was stretched out. Had surgery last week because my colon was stretched out. So it's kind of a every day is a new day kind of disability. And because it is so rare, every patient with EDS looks a little different. We don't have the research that we need right now to kind of nail down the specificities of that disorder. There are 13 different subtypes of Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, ranging from, your very basic, just hypermobile joints, maybe no pain at all, might look totally able-bodied walking down the street, as I was for the first 25 years of my life. Or it could be very lethal and be affecting your major vessels, making us prone to aneurysms or things like that, just because that collagen is so weak. So for me specifically, I was able-bodied, like I said, until I was about 24, 25. And my lower extremities, my hips, knees, and ankles began to loosen even further as I aged. And now my hips dislocate when I walk. So my joke that if you follow my Instagram, you see it a lot, is that I can walk very short distances, but I look like a pregnant duck. So it's not safe and it's not cute. So I've been using a wheelchair just for safety. There are some days where I can walk across, my house using furniture, and there are other days where I need help getting out of bed. So it's a very varied disability as well. But as you said, because of my background, because I was able-bodied for so long, and then I worked as a registered nurse at the bedside in emergency rooms, that was my specialty, for about 6 years before I had to leave that and start working away from the bedside because of my wheelchair. I can I have the ability to speak to these groups. I can speak to the medical community about what exactly is going on with my disability and that specificities, but then also I can talk about what it's like as a fairly newly disabled person coming into this world and seeing the disabled community in such a different light. I mean, as a nurse, I've always been a disability advocate, or so I thought. And actually putting my butt in a set of wheels, and it's a whole new world. Most of my life, I thought that, someone with a disability was held back because of their physical impairments. And that was the issue. And that's why we weren't able to work as much and we weren't able to do X, Y, and Z. And being in a chair, you realize that, oh, it's not actually me. It's that the rest of society isn't exactly prepared to accommodate the needs of the disabled community. And that's the hardest part that holds us back. And so through my platform, that's what I speak to the most often, is the little things that unless you're in a chair yourself or have a family member or a friend, you might not really recognize that the world isn't as accessible as one might think. And it's fascinating, and it's definitely it's every day is an adventure, and I love it.
Yeah. Oh. Well, I know that, so you've been involved in the medical field. I think one of the things that makes you so, such a great person to talk about this is because you've been involved in the medical field since you were 16.
Yes.
And so over the years, as your conditions advanced, there have been some changes that you've had to make, in the way that you work. So do you want to talk about that experience?
Sure. Like I said, I worked as, my whole career in healthcare has been emergency medicine. Like I said, I started when I was 16 as an EMT, and I didn't even get to tell you this story yesterday when we talked. I ended up becoming an EMT and getting interested in healthcare because I was in the ER so often from falls and head injuries due to my disability, that I may have been looked able-bodied, but I still had a collagen disorder. Yeah. So I was constantly in the emergency room. And one day my mom made a joke and said, "Ryan, if you're going to be in here so often, you might as well be pushing the stretcher." So I said, okay. So I became an EMT, worked my way through nursing school, became a registered nurse, and worked the bedside ER. And that was that was it for me. That was my dream job. I loved every second that I spent working as an emergency nurse. And so when my mobility started to decline and I kind of had to say, wait, this isn't how I pictured my life going. Now, I was told when I was 16, I would be in a wheelchair probably about the time I was 20. But I was 16 and I just kind of was like, okay, whatever you say, that's fine. Right now I'm walking. I don't care. So I didn't really process it or plan for it, as if you can plan for a major mobility limiting disability. So I took once my mobility started to kind of decline, I took myself away from what you would think of as bedside nursing. And I took a job as what I am now. I'm a case manager, where I get to work with patients just like me many, many times and help them get the medical equipment they need, their wheelchairs, walkers, get their homes outfitted the way that they might need. I help from everything from insurance issues to homelessness issues to putting people in nursing homes. It's a very, very wide umbrella of things that I get to do. But because of my experience as a patient, I think that makes me it gives me a step up in the game. And the biggest eye opener I've had with that job is going into patients' rooms. I'm over here, mourning my own loss of this dream job that I had. And my patients made it all worth it when I would roll into their rooms and they would say, you know what, you are the first person in my hospital stay who has been on my level, at eye level, not standing and veering over me and talking down to me like I don't know anything. You're the first person that's talked to me like a person. And I do this just because I've been in that bed, and it is awful when these people are looming over you in their big white coats and they're intimidating and they don't talk to you like a person. So that kind of spurred on my disability advocacy and healthcare even more, to hear that from my patients. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I'm sure you were a great ER nurse too, but I mean, this all gives you a perspective where, you have the empathy that's necessary to understand how they feel. One of the things that we like to encourage people to use history for, and use a knowledge of our past and the stories of other people, like the stories we're sharing today, is to be able to build empathy for the way that other people may feel. So because we can use that empathy to then improve the world that we live in, to be better citizens, to be better neighbors. And so that's an important skill that you clearly, have in your work. So we have, I don't know, about 5-6 more minutes to chat. So let's bring Elizabeth back on, if that's okay. Here she comes. There. So I want to talk a little bit about representation. And, one of the things when we started working, Elizabeth, was the sort of realization that all of the people that you work with in the capABLE project, in this display, they're in a museum on display with, Patrick Henry's glasses and buttons that belonged, to Pocahontas, and with women suffragists who, struggled for the right to vote, and many other historical figures. So I'm interested to know from Ryann sort of how you feel about being included in the big story of Virginia history. And I'm interested in hearing from you, Elizabeth, about, sort of what that does mean to the people that you work with who participate.
Well, for me, it's completely surreal because growing up, I joke about it being a history nerd and being raised by artists. I was in museums constantly in my childhood. That was like my fun place. And since our conversation yesterday, I started thinking back about it. And not once have I ever seen anybody who looks like me in a museum. And, growing up with a disability, you're kind of aware of that. And that just becomes your norm. And so it's not so much of I go in a museum and be sad not to see anybody in a wheelchair featured or any kind of disability history featured in that museum. It was just kind of the norm. And so it becomes this incredible feeling of elation, and just you finally see someone that looks like you being represented in media or in a museum as a whole. And I know that Elizabeth has also talked about the Target ads recently. Finally getting to see, people showing off clothes in a seated position or somebody with an ostomy or crutches, just being, advertised, not anything special, just wearing the normal clothes. And just to be included in that narrative has been really cool.
Yeah. How about you, Elizabeth? What kind of feedback have you gotten from some of the people that you've worked with about, being featured, at a museum?
I think it's so impactful. Everyone wants growing up to feel like they see someone like them being represented. And it also gives them, I think, because all of these models are such fantastic individuals and have done so many amazing things in the community, it not only gives them someone who maybe looks like them or has had some similar experiences as them, but these are individuals who are really thriving and are making our entire community better. So it also gives them, in a sense, someone to emulate. Because they get to see, wow, this person's like me. They also have Down syndrome like me, but look, they live by themselves and they have a really healthy relationship and they have a job and they drive. And so it really means so much to the students that we work with to see individuals from their community represented. And then in terms of the feedback from the models, it's amazing. Same with their families. Tears, usually, there's a lot of tears, and then a lot of just beaming smiles. But to see themselves on the wall, it feels very official, it feels very real. And then also to have it under the banner saying Virginia is for lovers. So it's really showing the history of Virginia and where they fit into the history of our state, because traditionally these perspectives would never be included when we think about the history of the state. Unfortunately, it's not something that's taught in our school history textbooks anywhere.
Yeah.
So to feel like they finally have that voice and their stories are also being told, I think that's so impactful.
Yeah. In prepping for our conversation today, it did occur to me, and Ryan, you made me think about this yesterday, because part of your early career was working with veterans, right? And so I was thinking about times where I actually saw people like with crutches or a wheelchair, and it was oftentimes in association with veterans, who were disabled as a result of service. But I think it's really, but that's only one segment of that population. I think broadening out that story is really critical. To being able to tell a more complete story of Virginia. I mean, there are nearly 1 million people in Virginia who are classified as having a disability. That's about 10% of the population. It's a significant part of our community that often, gets left out, and that certainly, we all ought to try to better represent. And I know that the museum has been very grateful for our partnership with Next Move, for sharing these stories with us and, with really all Virginians. So I think that people may have some questions.
Sure.
So if there are any questions and you'd like to participate in the Q&A, just log into Facebook or YouTube and submit comments. While we're sort of gathering those questions, Elizabeth, there were a few places that you thought people might be able to go to learn more. So would love to share those with folks before
Absolutely. So we get to do a lot of trainings out in the community, often with our corporate partners, as well as other community organizations. And one of the questions that we get asked as staff quite regularly is, what resources is our team excited about that talk about maybe disability etiquette or disability history or laws pertaining to access and equity? And here are some of the resources that we are currently enjoying or have more recently enjoyed, everything from books that we recommend to podcasts to film and TV. I know we were able to chat a little bit before this kicked off, and Ryann was saying that she especially loved Crib Camp, that was one of her favorite resources as well.
Well, that's great. Let's see. So I'm not seeing a lot of comments yet, so we'll wait. Maybe people are slow typing.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about? Somebody had a question about Ryann, your involvement in sports.
Yes. So growing up, I was not athletic. Like I said, I was in and out of the ER. I was constantly injury prone, and something that they tell you, with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, because I am so flexible and so stretchy, is that, basically you're going to have to live your life in a bubble. You can't play sports. You can't do any of that because, I could possibly hurt myself. So I was a dancer when I was ambulatory, and that was my life all through middle school and high school. But I was never good at sports. Running was the worst thing for me. And once I was in my wheelchair, I started to become more interested in fitness and got into weightlifting. And I learned that if I could put on more muscle, though it is stretchy muscle, it is still helping stabilize my joints. And so that kind of opened up a whole new world for me, because I learned that, maybe it wasn't that I was terrible at sports. It was that I can't run. So one of my best friends is actually the coach of a wheelchair basketball team down here in Roanoke, the Roanoke Stars. And as soon as my mobility began to be affected, he was like, hey, why don't you come try this out? And I had these terrible flashbacks to high school gym and getting hit in the head with basketballs and not being very athletic. So I was terrified. Turned out I love it. So now I play wheelchair basketball. Through the Miss Wheelchair program, I've been able to try many adaptive sports, from wheelchair basketball to rugby. I went skiing last June in an adaptive seated ski. I've gotten to try so many, and it's been incredible to not only, learn that, hey, maybe sports is something that I'm interested in and that I'm pretty good at, but also to meet this incredible disability community of athletes from across the nation through sports. So that has been really fun for me. I'm involved with a program out of Richmond, Sportable, that does all of our adaptive sports up there. And so I do a lot of work with them, and they're the ones that have taught me so much. They tried to get me to go fencing. That was a whole thing. But it's been awesome. So, open some doors.
Yeah. So another question is, Elizabeth, how can people get involved in Next Move and help you, with your mission?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you go to our website, www.thenextmoveprogram.org, you can learn all about our internship programming and sort of how to get involved if you want to be maybe a student or an intern, but you can also learn how to get involved if you want to volunteer from the community. And we're regularly looking for volunteers to help out with everything from mock interviews to coming in and guest teaching lessons about specific subject areas, to also helping us out with social skills meet and greets, where we get to practice our social skills in the workplace. And then once our bakery opens, we will also be looking for volunteers that can help us out in that space as well, specifically as it's tied to the culinary art work that we do and education that we have on site. And that specific website is www.tablespoonsbakery.com. And then we also regularly post on social media about upcoming opportunities. So you can follow us at Next Move Program and at Tablespoons Bakery.
So I know that Tablespoons is a big next move for Next Move. What happens after that?
So yes, Tablespoons is a big focus for us currently, and I know that we want to continue to grow out that particular program and not just offer internships, but also offer more in the way of employment to individuals that have gone through that program successfully. And throughout COVID, we've actually been very lucky to be able to hire a number of self-advocates who were former students. So we were able to have 4 individuals join the program who were former students and had been bakers with us, and now they are team members. So hopefully we'll continue to do more in the space of employment, because we feel like it's really important, if we're encouraging other organizations to train and to hire, that we also do that ourselves. And then specifically for capABLE and what comes next with that, we want to continue to work with amazing individuals here in Virginia to share their stories. I would love, even if at some point we could expand that effort and do it more regularly than once a year. I think that the demand would be there. And we certainly have plenty of amazing models who have great stories to share. So baby steps, though. But one day we would love to expand capABLE as well.
Yeah, well, we'll be right with you when you do.
That would be great.
And Ryan, what's next for you? What do you have coming up?
So COVID has, put a dent in quite a few things, but I have been doing most of my Miss Wheelchair duties via Zoom and via my Instagram or Facebook pages. They're the most recently updated. You can find me on any form of social media at Chronically Rye. It's Chronically RY or Chronically_RY to learn about my upcoming speaking events, or if, COVID keeps me in the house any longer, I might go insane, but recording a lot of videos about my personal story, my disability advocacy work, and so on and so forth. So I'm post about once a day, and you can learn more about me and all my craziness.
Great. Yeah, well, I encourage people to follow you on Instagram. I will say viewer discretion advised. Yeah. But it's amazing. So what you have to say is amazing. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today and for sharing your Virginia stories. We're really looking forward to putting capABLE in the galleries in our Story of Virginia exhibition. That'll open to the public on October 17th, so a week from tomorrow, and we'll be there till December 31st. And in the meantime, anyone who's watching can reach us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our next Curators at Home program will be on Friday, November 13th at noon. Our senior curator, Dr. William Rasmussen, will talk about some examples of watercolor paintings in our collection in conjunction with another new exhibition as we host the 41st Annual Watercolor Society of Virginia annual show. So thank you all for watching, and continue to be safe.